Welcome everyone. I am so glad that you are here this evening. I know Tuesday nights can be a bit busy, but thank you so much for attending and welcome to another Data Dragons meetup. So without any further ado, just some basic house rules. Please keep your mics on mute while you're busy. The session is recorded and I do make them available afterwards via YouTube. And then, questions, comments, feedback, even if you didn't do any, manage to look at the report or the data is perfectly fine. Any comments or critique or feedback is always welcome. And just questions around the data or even sometimes ethical questions around how this data is gathered. I once had a really interesting discussion on data activism. So really, you are free to let your mind wander. And how this works. So everybody who creates an analysis gets 10 to 15 minutes to present their work. I have actually no idea if anybody else did today, but if you do have, then straight after I'm finished, you can go. And I proceed to break down the data a bit before I go into my work. And then finally, you are free to deliver any feedback on the work or what you thought about the actual data set, or if you disagreed with some of the findings that they had. Cool. So I'm just going to jump right in. The data source that I found for us this month was the World Economic Forum's Gender Pay Gap Report. And I unfortunately was only able to find the Africa data set. And I think it would have been more interesting to look at it from the perspective of Europe versus Africa versus Asia and, of course, Latin America. But unfortunately, it's okay if you didn't prep anything. Completely fine, guys. Let me start again. So that was the whole thing about it, that I could only find the African data set. But so what they gave us is the country, and then they gave, not all countries were there. I noticed there wasn't they didn't include Egypt, and then they didn't include Morocco. So they kind of left out parts of North Africa, but they did have Sub-Saharan Africa and West Africa and Central Africa. And then they give you the currency converter as well as the average annual salary for women and the average annual salary for men. And then within that, they also provide you the exchange rate to the US dollars. And then finally, they give you the PDF report, which is the full 374-page report of what the World Economic Forum finds. And just to give you some more context, this report was released in 2021, but the data comes from 2019. So if you think back to 2019, not 2019, 2020. Was collected in 2019, begin mid-2020, and that's obviously the time of the global pandemic. So the economy is going through a contraction period thanks to COVID, and there wasn't as much work. So I've had some comments from some people about how it was they thought the numbers were too low in some cases, especially for South Africa. This is partially due to the math around that, or the impacts of the COVID pandemic. And then just in case you didn't know how to do currency conversion, you would basically take the average annual salary as well as the exchange rate and divide the annual salary by the exchange rate to get the US dollar value. And then finally, when they compiled this data, they included all forms of workers. So temporary workers as well as those working within the informal sector. So I know when I first looked at how much they said South African women were earning, I was a bit shocked and did some extra research on that. But it makes sense when you think that they included all these people who you might not typically think of when you are doing this. So and they didn't. Unfortunately, it's like a average, so it might not be reflective of what you might think an accountant's earning. Or a lawyer or something, but it is the grand average, and it does show that, but you are free to critique it later on. Okay, so let's actually get to it. Cool, so that was the background of the data. And then I shall show you. Okay. Cool. So this is what my data sheet looks like. So just to prep you a bit about the data before I show you the actual dash. This, I went and obviously kept what they gave me, but then I also went and found the education, well, I called it education rate, but it's the mean average years that a person within this country can expect to be educated by the time they reach about 20, per split by gender. So we can see that in Angola, a woman who has been educated can expect 5.86 years, whereas a man would be 7.32 years. And then I also went and converted their average annual currency into US dollars, just so it would be a bit more useful. And then we can just, some cases for the education years, the data points were missing. So that was a bit frustrating. So the way I went around that was I went and found the average, and then I inserted them in. So that's just for your point of reference, the woman's average years and the men's average years. So yeah, so nothing too fancy there, but that's what I did. And then if you would like to explore that data, I went onto the educationininequalities.org site. And they are quite a reputable site, apparently, and they make use of the Department of Health and Social Sciences survey that goes out to various countries each year to find these data points. Okay, so now, fantastic, cool. So what I basically did was I went and compared just the amount of money that someone can expect to earn within various countries, as well as the amount of years of education that they have access to by the time they are 20. So the darker the shade of blue for men, or the darker the shade of pink for women, shows them more that they have more years of education access, whereas the larger the circle size shows that they have more money in the end. Smaller circle, less money. Yeah, that's the self-explanatory part. And then you can obviously drill down by specific country. So if you're interested mainly in South Africa, you could just see that. And then you would see that the US dollars for men is 837, and then the US dollars for women is 571. I think that equals out. I had it earlier. Sorry about this. Oh, dollars to rands. So yeah, 571 for women only works out. Okay, it works out to about 9,800 Rand per month, which you might think is not correct, but when you go and look at how much people are earning in South Africa, the average salary paid in 2021 was 14,900. And if you take into account the fact that they were looking at everyone from temporary workers to office workers, it does seem kind of right. Yeah, okay. So that was that. And then I just went and compared the earning potential from ascending, descending perspective, as well as the average years of education. So yeah, nothing too hectic. I was kind of hoping that more people would have prepped, but regardless, yeah, and then just to add some things, part of the reason why there was a decline that I thought was interesting within the global gender gap reports, there was an overall decline in women's pay within the 2020 and 2018 when they compared this, partly because of the fact that after COVID, a lot of feminine dominated industries like hospitality, the media and things got decimated or heavily impacted, should I say, by the COVID pandemic. So yeah, so that was just some extra notes. And then some surprising countries did better than what was expected by reducing the pay gap, like the United Arab Emirates apparently did shockingly well. So yeah, so that was what I prepped.